Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 5, Day 3. Today's journal, I'd like for you to answer, what have you learned so far? What are some causes of the Civil War? Okay, that is all you have to worry about. And then finally, what years was the Civil War fought? I'd like for you to put your actual range, don't care if it's right or wrong, put what you think it was fought based on what you know from the notes. Okay, but list at least 5 causes of the Civil War, what you believe, and then we will be talking about further causes as well today and kind of getting deeper into some of those issues. Now, continuing our causes of the Civil War, our essential question is, what were the effects of sectionalism on the nation of the United States? And then what was the final issue that led to the Civil War beginning between the Confederate States and the Union? Now, sectionalism is continuing to grow. We've talked about that extensively since Unit 4. In 1856, Northerner Charles Sumner is attacked in Congress after he gave a speech supporting Kansas being a free state. He was attacked by Southern Congressman Preston Brooks with harsh language. Brooks then attacked him with a golden cane, and Southern sympathizers actually sent Brooks a new cane in support of what he did. And so you have a very aggressive, hostile, so to speak, Southern congressmen they're tired of the push against slavery. You've also got an issue here of a president, which we'll talk about in a second, who's not doing much to stop it either. But all of these are examples of sectionalism. And obviously in the northern side of things, Charles Sumner is going to receive a lot of sympathy. But in the South, Preston Brooks is going to receive a lot of praise for what he did. Okay, here's a political cartoon of the action. Now, if you notice in the picture, those who are smiling are Southerners. And if you went back and you looked up each one of those congressmen, you would find a picture that is closely related to them. Now, James Buchanan. James Buchanan was a Democrat president. He was a very, very weak president to go along with the other 4 the 3 that preceded him. One of the reasons that he was weak is that he did very little to actually change anything in the nation in regards to slavery, and he allowed sectionalism to grow even deeper. He will be the last Democrat that is elected until the late 1800s, and one of the reasons that he struggled was he alienated his own party members and really focused on trying to kind of stay in the middle, which upset Southerners more towards the federal government, but also upset Northerners who wanted to see laws excluding slavery. The other problem here is that the Senate killed almost every bit of legislation that those who were for abolition tried to push through. The Senate would kill it off, and basically it never could actually get through Congress, try to kind of settle the dispute or at least kind of go one way or another. The other issue, the big issue for James Buchanan, is he tried to actually declare Kansas as a slave state, which did not go over well and ended up not being declared either or and remained a territory. Just a lot of big issues here that he tried to step in and make decisions, and they were just trying to kind of skirt the fence. Now, the big issue during his presidency, or one of the most important Supreme Court cases to date, in 1857, the Dred Scott versus Sanford case came to the Supreme Court. Scott was taken from the South to the North, and he thought that since he was on free soil, he was free. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court instead ruled in the trial that blacks were not citizens and that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. Now, that's a big ruling, okay? But it also ruled that Congress could not prevent slavery from expanding. And so this is a lot of landmark decisions by the Supreme Court, okay? The fact that they're calling African Americans basically property, saying that the spread of slavery cannot be limited and that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. And the reason it was declared unconstitutional is because it's limiting economic growth, and it almost was viewed as like it was hindering you from prosperity, which you should be allowed to prosper as needed. Now, this is the first time since Marbury versus Madison that a federal law had been declared unconstitutional. Many of the Chief Justices, as you can guess, were Southerners, and the Chief Justice even owned slaves. So it makes sense why this ruling was declared, and it goes to show that it is important who is appointed to the Supreme Court as well as what decisions get made. Now, in 1858, Abraham Lincoln had a debate with Stephen Douglas in Illinois for the Senate. They were the complete opposites, and the key issue in the debate was slavery. Douglas proposed a Freeport doctrine that basically said that slavery should be determined by popular sovereignty in the territory, and that essentially there shouldn't be a yes or no to slavery. It should be whatever they decide in that area, that's what they get. Lincoln argued that the Dred Scott decision said the territories couldn't exclude slavery, and basically he saw slavery as a moral evil, but wasn't an abolitionist. Okay, he just wanted to halt the expansion of slavery, and essentially what he was trying to say there is that the way the Supreme Court has ruled, there's no way to stop slavery now, and in his eyes, slavery just needs to be contained, not eliminated. And it's important to note that that's one of the things with Abraham Lincoln that is argued as to why some view him as really good and some view him as really bad, is that even though he saw it as moral evil, he wasn't necessarily standing up against it. And in fairness, he's a politician. And as most of you have realized probably in your lifetime, politicians have to be politicians. They have to say things sometimes maybe they don't necessarily believe, but they have to go along with. Now, in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, not 1 year later, on October 16th, John Brown was back up to his old antics. He led 18 men to the arsenal at Harpers Ferry in Virginia, and they went to get weapons and incite a slave rebellion. Before he could, though, it was put down by federal troops led by Robert E. Lee. And yes, that is the same Robert E. Lee that will be one of the most instrumental generals in the Confederate military. And John Brown made this quote after he was caught: "I am quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." And so even though he was considered very radical and obviously trying to create kind of some anarchy in these southern states, he wasn't completely wrong in that, a war is coming. Eventually he was hung. I believe some of his men were hung as well. I want to say a few were executed by a gun, but anyways, that doesn't matter. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected as the first Republican president. And remember, we talked about the Republican Party really forms during this time as a result of all the different smaller parties that have kind of either died off or don't really have a huge following, and they need to join with somebody else's cause in order to, have more influence. But his election led to the secession of South Carolina, and later on 6 other southern states followed. Pretty much the day that he got elected, South Carolina was like, we're out. And the reason they did that is because they saw Abraham Lincoln's election, the fact that he was a Republican, they saw all of those things as that he was going to be very influential in trying to eliminate slavery. That's what Southerners viewed, despite the fact that really Abraham Lincoln may have been a little bit more like some of the presidents before him and tried to maintain a kind of a policy of neutrality between the two sides in trying to keep the Union together had the war not started. But we don't know, obviously, because history happened the way it happened. Here are the candidates that ran in the election. Despite the fact that Stephen Douglas defeated Abraham Lincoln in the Illinois Senate, he did not have a chance against him in the presidency. Abraham Lincoln was well liked. The problem is his election pretty much tore the nation in two. Now, the Confederate States of America formed as a result of the election, and the southern states have basically become their own country. Jefferson Davis becomes the first president of the Confederacy, and you have essentially all of these states that are in purple and in blue that are going to be actual southern states, and then the territories or states here in orange are what we call border states, which are going to kind of maintain a loyalty to the Union, but are still going to be involved in the Civil War quite actively. All right, here is the Confederate seal of America. You can see this was kind of their logo, so to speak, for the new country, with their motto as, "With God as our vindicator, Dio Vindici." All right, now, here are the causes of the Civil War: social, economic, and political. And we've talked about all of these various things throughout the class, from slavery to Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and the issue of popular sovereignty, which led to Bleeding Kansas because there was a civil war, the Underground Railroad, which we talked about with Harriet Tubman, the Dred Scott decision, then obviously the attack at Harper's Ferry. All of those are social causes. Economic problems started long before that, back all the way when Jackson was president with the Tariff of Abominations. Remember, South Carolina was on the verge of secession even then. Also, these huge sectional differences between the Industrial Society of the North and the Agricultural Society of the South. Finally, we have the political causes, where you have the Republican Party forming, which is becoming an abolitionist party. Popular sovereignty being left up to people to decide whether or not it's going to be slave or free, which led to more problems. And then finally, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. 60. Now, here are your 3 questions for the day. Please make sure you're getting these answered each day. And finally, here are your 4 vocabulary words. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I'll talk to you soon.